In the small town of Blackstone, Iowa, lived Richard Kennedy, a widower and auto mechanic whose repair shop, Kennedy Fix, was the work of his entire life. One day, a fire destroyed it, and later the authorities tried to buy the land for a commercial project. But Richard stood his ground, and the story ended on a hopeful note. Hi everyone, welcome to Life Unveiled. Let's get started. Richard Kennedy was 45 years old, and for the last 10 of those, he'd poured his heart into his auto shop in quiet Blackstone. He was born in that very town, in an old house with peeling paint and creaky shutters, where his father, a man with rough hands, fixed neighbours' bicycles in a cramped garage, and his mother, always in an apron, baked fragrant apple pies to share with everyone on the street. After his wife Anna passed away 5 years earlier from a prolonged illness, Richard was left alone with his grief and their 14-year-old son, Ethan, a light-haired boy who took after his mother. Kennedy Fix came to life because of Anna. With her gentle smile and unwavering faith in her husband, she convinced him to leave his factory job and start his own business. The shop was a humble structure, cinder block walls, a tin roof, a faded sign, but inside it thrived. Richard spent his days tinkering with pickup engines, changing tyres, adjusting valves, while Ethan sat nearby, learning to take apart carburetors and wield tools the way his father taught him. Trouble struck on a sweltering August day in 2021, when faulty, worn-out wiring sparked a fire that engulfed the shop. The flames consumed everything, leaving only blackened, charred walls and the acrid stench of burnt metal. Richard stood before the smouldering ruins, feeling the ground slip out from under him. The insurance payout was a pittance, barely covering a fraction of the damage, and his personal savings were nearly non-existent. Most of it had gone toward Anna's medical bills. Ethan, clutching a soot-streaked wrench, stepped up to his father and said softly, "We'll get through this, Dad. You'll see." But Richard, staring at the ashes, just shook his head and muttered, "It's all over, son." Word of the fire spread through Blackstone, a town of just 3,000 souls where everyone knew each other by name. The next morning, Jack Parsons, a local farmer with broad shoulders and calloused hands, showed up at the ruins with an old toolbox. "You can't be left without work, Richard. This is your place," he said. Soon after, Emily Reed, a school teacher with warm eyes, arrived with a basket of freshly baked cookies. "You've bailed us out with our cars so many times, now it's our turn." By noon, a small crowd had gathered around the burnt-out shell. Some offered a few bucks, others their labour. Richard, full of pride and used to relying only on himself, brushed them off at first. "Thanks, but I'll manage." Ethan, though, looked at his father and said firmly, "Dad, they want to help. Let's give them a chance." Emily, wasting no time, suggested holding a fundraiser at the school where she taught literature. Richard reluctantly nodded his approval. That evening, the school auditorium filled with people. About 100 residents showed up to support the Kennedy family. Ethan, shy under the weight of so many eyes, stepped onto the stage and spoke. "Mom loved this shop more than anything. She used to say Dad could fix anything, from a tractor to a broken heart. We don't want it to disappear." Jack Parsons stood up right then and promised to lend his old barn on the farm as a temporary workshop. Emily volunteered to organise a charity auction, while Will Thompson, a local carpenter with a thick beard, offered his skills to help rebuild. People started exchanging looks and chiming in with their own ideas. One could paint walls, another could haul lumber. The room buzzed with quiet determination as neighbours swapped stories of how Richard had kept their old jalopies running or fixed a tractor just in time for harvest. Even old Mrs. Carter, who rarely left her porch, sent her grandson with a jar of coins she'd saved up, saying, "Tell Richard it's for the shop." Blackstone seemed to wake from a slumber. Ethan and his friends went around town, plastering fundraiser flyers on poles and shop windows, their sneakers kicking up dust on the gravel roads. Emily put her grandmother's old watercolour paintings up for auction, raising $200, and added a batch of her own homemade jams to sweeten the deal. Jack and Will spent 2 days clearing out the barn. They hauled out rusty barrels, ran electricity from the farmhouse, set up an old workbench, and even patched a leaky corner of the roof with spare shingles. Sheriff Logan Brown, usually stern but kind at heart, rolled up in his pickup and helped clear the charred debris, his boots crunching over the ash as he worked alongside the others. By the end of the week, the townsfolk had collected $4,000, not enough for a new shop, but enough to spark a glimmer of hope in Richard. He began to see that loneliness wasn't his fate, and that accepting help wasn't weakness. It was strength. Late one evening, as he watched Ethan sweep the barn floor under a flickering bulb, he felt a flicker of something he hadn't in years. Possibility. A week later, Thomas Wood, a clean-shaven businessman from Des Moines in an expensive suit, arrived in Blackstone. Having caught wind of the fire from local news, he saw an opportunity and offered to buy the land to build a modern gas station with a convenience store. $100,000 cash, right now, he proposed to Richard, standing by the shop's remains and waving a contract. The town authorities jumped at the idea, envisioning new jobs and tax revenue. Richard paused to think. The money could erase his debts, give Ethan a shot at college, restore stability. But then he glanced at his son, tinkering with an engine in Jack's barn, and remembered Anna beaming with joy when their first customer rolled in. "No, it's not for sale," Richard said sharply, meeting Wood's gaze. The businessman left empty-handed, and the authorities backed off quickly when they caught wind of the residents' disapproval. Inspired by the support, Ethan sat down and wrote a letter to the Blackstone Times. He poured out the story of the fire, the neighbours' kindness, and why the shop mattered to their family. The editor, an elderly Mr. Brent Green, read it and slapped it on the front page with the headline, "The Strength of Blackstone." The story took on a life of its own. Someone sent $200 from Des Moines, a school club in Cedar Rapids raised $300, and an old widow from the edge of town chipped in $50 from her pension. Within a month, the total climbed to $8,000. Richard and Ethan set up shop in Jack's barn, turning it into a working space. Will crafted new workbenches from the oak planks. Emily sewed floral curtains to add a touch of warmth. Customers came back almost immediately. Jack with his tractor, Emily with her beat-up sedan, and soon others followed. By the spring of 2022, Richard had saved enough to rent a small plot of land near the original site. The neighbours rallied once more. Some painted the new building's walls a bright white. Others hauled boards and mixed concrete. By August, exactly a year after the fire, Kennedy Fix stood again, modest, with a simple tin roof, but sturdy, like Richard's own spirit. Inside, it smelled of fresh paint and motor oil, and a new workbench, built by Will's hands, lined the wall. Ethan worked alongside his father, now handling engines with confidence, while customers brought their vehicles as if nothing had changed. One evening, Richard pinned a photograph to the wall. He and Ethan stood in front of the new building, surrounded by Jack, Emily, Will, and other neighbours, their faces glowing with smiles. The fire had taken so much: walls, tools, years of labour. But it had given something greater: faith in people, in their kindness and willingness to lend a hand. Ethan, looking at the picture, said quietly, "Mum would be proud of us, Dad." Richard, smiling for the first time in ages, nodded. "Yeah, son, she would." The story's outcome is clear. The shop endured not just because of Richard and Ethan's grit, but because of the unity of Little Blackstone. The lesson here is this: even after the darkest days, when all seems lost, togetherness and support can revive what was thought gone forever. Richard and Ethan proved that strength lies not only in your own hands, but in those ready to help. Kennedy Fix became more than an auto shop. It turned into a living symbol of rebirth, a reminder that from ashes, something new can rise if there are people willing to stand and fight alongside you.
If you enjoyed this story, drop a like and subscribe for more tales like this. Hit the bell, and we'll catch you in the next one.